the thing I love about this version of the Cavaliers is that they've built it organically. And nothing against LeBron. I mean, guy's probably the greatest, if not one of the top three greatest to ever play the game. I brought a championship to Cleveland, just an incredible story. Again, I called a couple of his high school games, but what he has done is simply incredible. But this isn't LeBron with just a bunch of other guys. This was a team that was built meticulously by Kobe Altman, general manager Mike Gansey. The drafting of Garland, the drafting of Okoro, the drafting of Mobley. He gets himself involved, meaning Kobe Altman, gets himself involved in that James Harden mega deal to get Jarrett Allen to Cleveland, a shrewd move, and then takes the big swing with Donovan Mitchell.
Before we delve into your career in the Cavaliers, we have a bit of a tradition on our show. So take this question any way you want it. What is your first or favorite basketball memory?
Wow, that's a great question. NBA memory?
Just basketball, just any way you want it. It's up to you.
My first basketball memory is actually as a very young boy, and it's kind of how I got started. It started my interest in radio, and that was listening to high school basketball games on the radio when I lived in New Hampshire. And I thought, boy, this is a pretty cool thing. So yeah, that would be my very first memory of basketball.
And can you just tell our audience just how you got into broadcasting? Myself, I'm just a media nerd, so I'm always interested in just the origin stories of just play-by-play commentators and just how you got to this position where you're calling some of the greatest action on a nightly basis.
Yeah, well, the memory that I just shared plays into that. I lived in Nashua, New Hampshire, and there were two high schools in the area. One was a larger public school, Nashua High School, and then the city of Nashua also had a smaller parochial high school, Bishop Girton, and this local radio station would carry the games. And we actually had neighbors on either side of us, and one went to Nashua High and the other went to Bishop Girton. So I would listen to these games and I would hear my neighbors getting talked about in high school football and basketball games because they played those sports. And I thought, well, this is really cool. And then the announcer, you could hear the gym or hear the football field in the background and the bands and all that. And I thought, man, this guy's got it made. He gets in for free and he gets popcorn and hot dogs. And, my neighbors are on the radio. So I think this would be a pretty cool job. And so that's really where it started, to be honest with you. From that point on, I wanted to be a sportscaster, and I was living in the New England area. So I would listen to the great broadcasters out of Boston. Johnny Most, of course, did the Celtics, and Gil Santos did the Patriots, and Bob Wilson did the Boston Bruins. And so I would just listen to them. And then, in my day, believe me, guys, I'm a lot older than the three of you. There was no streaming. There was no internet. All I had was a little radio. And so I would just turn that dial up and down and up and down and listen to all these out-of-town stations, these 50,000-watt stations. So I would listen to as many games as I could from all these different markets all over the country on this little radio that I had. So it just grew from there. And in my teen years, my family moved to Ohio, and so continued that passion and graduated from Kent State with a telecom degree. And I was off and running, working small market radio for many, many years before I was really fortunate enough to land the Cavs job in September of 2019.
Go ahead, man.
Yeah, so goes without saying, the Cavs have shocked everybody this year, I think. I don't think it's a shock that they've had a successful season, but the degree of their success, I think is fair to say, has been pretty shocking. How surprised have you been by what they've done so far this season?
Well, Matt, you're right. Nobody had 44-10 for the Cavs on their bingo card as you get to the All-Star break. I mean, it's just been an astounding season so far. To your point, everybody thought, yeah, this is going to be a pretty good basketball team. Went to the Eastern Conference semifinals last year and basically kept the roster intact. Of course, a real difficult decision to make a coaching change. That wasn't something that the Cavs approached lightly. JB Bickerstaff did a phenomenal job. He's a terrific coach. You can see what he's doing in Detroit this year. But they bring in Kenny Atkinson just for a different vision. And so the guys in the locker room can hear a different voice that seems to happen quite a bit in professional sports. And Kenny has really unlocked this team, especially at the offensive end. So I'm not surprised, as you said, that the team's having success. 44-10 success? Yeah, that's incredible. It has just been a remarkable run through the first 2/3 of the season. And to me, this team just continues its upward ascension. Got knocked out in the first round 2 years ago. Last year, lost to Boston in the semis in 5 games. They didn't have Jarrett Allen. Donovan Mitchell didn't play the final 2 games in that Boston series. So I'm not saying they would have beat Boston, but I think that 5-game loss is a little misleading when you didn't have Jarrett and you didn't have Donovan. So now this year they're healthy. Again, knock on wood, they got to stay healthy. The acquisition of DeAndre Hunter, I think, is just phenomenal. I think he's the missing piece as far as the roster was concerned. So, yeah, I think you can look for the Cavs to make a deep playoff run into May and hopefully into June. I think this is a team that's constructed to get to the NBA Finals. Will they? Well, that's why you play. But I think they have the roster, and I think they have the ability to get there.
And from what you've seen, Tim, I mean, you mentioned, of course, the drastic change on paper there with Kenny Atkinson taking over the head coaching role. Are there other things that you've seen aside from that has been, because it's never just one thing, as we all know, but the roster has, aside from that move for DeAndre Hunter, the roster has stayed pretty consistent, which that continuity can be a great thing. Are there other things that have been the catalyst to their progress aside from Coach Atkinson?
Yeah. Well, first of all, you got to remember that 2 years ago with New York, and even last year with Boston in the playoffs, a young basketball team. So they're growing, they're maturing. This is not an aging roster that these guys are hanging on for a year or two just to get a ring. They're literally entering their prime. So they're learning as they go, and you can see the maturity out on the floor with the likes of Garland and Mobley. So I think that's part of it. I also think Kenny Atkinson's vision and the system that he's brought in offensively has really unlocked these guys. And Kenny, of course, was a head coach in Brooklyn for 4 years and then stepped back, became an assistant coach again, a year with Ty Lue in L.A., and then the last 3 years with Steve Kerr. And boy, you can really see the influence of that Golden State philosophy, that warrior offense where there's constant movement, constant motion. They call it drive, kick, swing, and everybody's moving. So that's the primary difference is at the offensive end, where they really have incorporated so much more motion into the offense. And to Kenny's credit, listen, you go all the way back to his introductory news conference. He said that afternoon, credit to JB. JB has built a terrific defense here. I'm not going to tinker with it much. It wasn't like he came in and just said, I'm starting all over with everything. Different offensive view, yes. But credit to Kenny that he credited JB to say they've got a great defense. I'm pretty much going to leave it alone. And again, this year, a top 10 defense in the NBA.
Tim, I'm really fascinated by this aspect of your story, kind of just how you went from calling high school games, applying for the Cavs job, and getting it. And it's such a cool story. So what was that transition like to go from, you're calling local high school games with, future college stars and that sort of thing, and then here you are in the NBA?
Yeah, it's been it's been a wild journey, to say the very least. Now, part of that happened. I mean, the reason it happened was there was a sad event in the Cavalier family. Their longtime television voice, who was a phenomenal broadcaster, Fred McLeod, he passed away suddenly of a heart attack 3 weeks before the 2019-2020 season was about to begin. And so I was calling high school sports in Lorain County, which is a county just west of Cleveland. But we were a Cavalier affiliate station, the station that I did work at. And so I would go down to the arena. I was doing shows at the arena, pregame shows right on the floor before the games. There were a lot of Cavalier employees, for lack of a better term, that actually were aware of my work because they lived on the west side of Cleveland. So, they always say you never know who's listening. Somebody's listening. And I found that out because it was interesting that, there were several people within the organization that were aware of my work. And I'll correct you on one thing. I didn't apply for the job. The Cavaliers actually reached out to me when Fred passed. A day or two later, I got an email from the Cavaliers to say, please forward as much as you can, as soon as you can. And I was puzzled by that because I had always done radio. I hadn't been a television guy. And now that you see this face, you know why. And so, I'm strictly radio. And I thought, well, okay, this is different because my assumption was they were just going to hire somebody on the television side to replace Fred. But that wasn't their plan. Their plan was to transition John Michael, who had been doing radio, over to the television side. And I was hired to do the radio side. And it was a whirlwind transition. I did a high school football game on a Friday night. And then the following Wednesday, I did my first Cavs game in Orlando against the Magic. But, play-by-play is play-by-play. And I tell people that all the time. One of the things that I really tried to accomplish while I was calling high school games was to make them sound big. If I was calling a high school football game, I wanted it to sound like it was an NFL game. I wanted crowd noise. I wanted field mics. Let's make this sound big. I tried to make a high school basketball game sound like an NBA game. If you're calling play-by-play, and once you're rattling out the names, who knows what level you're calling? I mean, if you're saying Smith over to Johnson, Johnson down the right wing to Williams, Williams fires it out front to Scott, you don't know what level I'm calling. You just know I'm calling play-by-play. So I think they heard what I was doing play-by-play wise and just felt it could transition to NBA basketball. And I'm incredibly blessed to have the job. And I've been told, I've never done the research, but I've been told that they think I'm the only guy that went from high school basketball to NBA basketball.
And that sounds like such solid advice for aspiring play-by-play announcers to go big with it.
Absolutely. No, I shared that story with a lot of people in different podcasts and interviews that, number one, again, you never know who's listening. You could be calling the worst game on a Friday night and they got a running clock going, but somebody's listening. Don't think nobody's listening, and you never know who's listening. And like I said, for all the years that I had done high school sports, little did I know that, people and important people within the Cavalier organization were listening to me do high school basketball. And then the second part of that, as I said, don't just mail it in. It doesn't matter what the score, doesn't matter what the time. Number one, your audience deserves it. Your advertisers who are on the game deserve it. So, give it your A1 best shot every time you put that mic on.
What is your philosophy when it comes to calling Cavaliers games in regards to maintaining neutrality in terms of what happens? Is your philosophy to kind of lean towards the Cavalier perspective, or does the caller right down the middle? We've had a bunch of announcers, play-by-play commentators, color commentators, and PA announcers. Their philosophies are in different directions when it pertains to this. I'm just curious, your philosophy.
Well, I work for the Cleveland Cavaliers, and that, every direct deposit every 2 weeks, it comes from the Cavaliers. So, believe me, I swing towards the Cavs. There's no doubt about that. That being said, if the other team makes a tremendous play or hits a big shot, or on the flip side, if the Cavs don't do something well, a bad turnover or whatever the case may be, you have to call that, because if you aren't anything but 100% positive every single play, every single game for the team you're announcing for, you lose your credibility, because something happens and the listeners, even though they can't see it, if you're describing it well enough, they know something didn't go right for the Cavaliers. But if you're singing their praises anyway, they're like, really, Tim, come on. If he never does or rarely does, but if Garland fires a pass 6 feet over the head of Mitchell and it flies out of bounds, you got to say, that was a bad pass, right? Now, DG doesn't do that very often, but you at least have to be honest with your audience so that when a real good thing happens, they know you're being honest with them. So you have to still have that credibility. But no doubt, when the Cavs make a big shot or something really good happens for the Cavaliers, the listeners know, yeah, I'm your Cavs guy. I'm going to call it that way.
Yeah, that's really cool. It's funny because I grew up listening to radio also. I grew up in the Houston area, and so listening to Gene Peterson call Rockets games. And it was such a big part of my life. I was either, commuting, driving around, and, listening to the Rockets games and hearing that voice was just such a cool thing. Radio, has got, you mentioned it a little earlier, right? There's streaming, there's all that other stuff, but it looks like radio still just got this pull on people. Do you have any kind of insight on what that is? Like why people are still drawn to radio? Is it just, is it people like, me when I was in the car all the time or on the work site or whatever?
That's a great question. And it's interesting because the past couple of years, we've done this feature where folks can text in while they're listening to the games. And it's always astounding to me, the different ways. As I just said, people are listening. You don't know where, you don't know how, but people are listening. We'll get these texts from Uber drivers and second shift workers and people just out in their car taking their kids to a basketball practice or home from a game. And so I think radio will always have that draw. And I think there's also something about the theater of the mind with radio. And I don't mean that in any way disparaging towards television, but to me, when I listen to a game, it just has a different sound. It has a different feel than when I watch a game. And I don't know why that is, but I think people still appreciate that. Radio travels. You can, especially with baseball, you can be sitting by your pool, pick up, now your phone or your radio or whatever the case may be, go inside, go back outside. So radio also has a little bit of versatility with it insofar as just how you're able to listen and where you're able to listen. But I think folks like that mystery part of the radio. Here's this guy sitting in an arena in Cleveland, Ohio, and I'm listening in Albuquerque or wherever the case may be. And so, yeah, I think that will always be a draw. And then certainly my background in local radio, the ability to go out and cover your local high school, your local college, your whatever it may be. That's something that, yeah, there's some streaming that gets into it a little bit, but for the most part, that's still local radio at its best.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned baseball because I think my favorite sound on radio is probably the crack of the bat on the ball. And it sounds so much better on the radio than it does on anything else. So it's just so cool.
Yep. No, there's something magical about that. I totally agree. We've got one of the very best in baseball here in Cleveland, and Tom Hamilton, who's a dear friend of mine, and he's actually being inducted into the Hall of Fame, or he's being honored. Broadcasters don't get inducted, but being honored in Cooperstown this summer. And Tom just has a magical way of calling a baseball game. And you're right, man, you hear that crack of the bat and you just know something is happening. And then Hammy describes it. But I agree with you. Baseball on the radio, and I've been blessed. The Guardians have had me do some games the past few years, and there is nothing like it. Baseball and radio really go hand in hand.
In basketball, and I'm purely speaking anecdotally, I always notice distinctively like the timeout horn buzzing, and then that sort of buzz of the crowd. And to use maybe a bad analogy, is kind of like a Daredevil superhero effect that I just feel like you get so much more atmosphere from the radio than you do from watching the television broadcast sometimes.
I agree with that. And I was mentioning back when I was doing high school sports, we put mics on the backboards. We put mics at the scorer's table. We wanted to hear that swish of the net when it would go through, or the ball clang off the rim, or, a mic down in the scorer's table. You'd hear the shoes as they were squeaking as they went by. The sound of the game on the radio is just as important as the actual play-by-play, because listeners, they want to hear that ball go through. It's funny. I think, the guys that I work with in Cleveland, our production team, I think they're the best in the league. They do a phenomenal job, and great communication between myself and them throughout the game. And I'm always telling those guys, hey, more sound. I mean, if you can get the basket mic up, or you can get the courtside mic up, I think listeners love it. So that's great feedback. I love to hear that, because I think it does. That buzzer sounds, bah! I mean, you're hearing it through the radio. That's awesome. I mean, you feel like you're sitting right there at the arena, and the crowd noise. I love it when somebody makes a big shot, buzzer beater or whatever, and I'll just shut up. People don't want to hear me. They want to hear that crowd. They want to feel like, man, I'm sitting right there. Mitchell just did a 3-ball to close out the quarter. You heard the buzzer, you heard the swish, and now you're hearing the crowd. I just keep my mouth shut. I mean, the sounds tell the story at that point.
How difficult was it to work, outside of that visual medium that you are as the radio play-by-play, the eyes for the audience? How difficult was that to get used to when you were starting to hone that craft?
Man, you guys are asking really good questions. That's a good question. And of course, my mentor and the guy that really was my guiding star in broadcasting was Joe Tate, legendary Hall of Fame voice for the Cavaliers, who I met while I was in college, and that's a whole nother long story. But boy, he ingrained a lot of things into me as far as play-by-play. Radio, especially, score in time, because there is no scoring bug. There is no crawl. If you're on the radio, I can still hear him. Timothy, give the score in time. Give the score in time, because people don't know. And we've all had it happen where if you're in your car or you're somewhere and they don't give the score in time, you're like, what's the score? I don't care how much you know about a 2-1-2 zone. I just want to know what the score is. So Joe ingrained that into me, but he also was adamant. And again, you just kind of learn it that, Tim, what you're describing, people can't see. So you can't say, right when you saw right there, or when that happened, you've got to describe it. You're painting a picture for them. I try to do that as vividly as possible. I try to tell where the ball is, if it's on a wing, if it's in front of a bench, if it's at the 3-point arc. And I'm not saying that listeners are literally picturing every single thing, but hopefully they're getting into the fact that, if he lobs it into the low block, they can follow that. So it's not just a pass. Where was the pass? Who made the pass? So you just try to be as descriptive as you possibly can be.
Do you prefer one medium or the other in terms of radio and television? You mentioned that there's a transitional process in terms of going from radio to television, do you think, because I agree with Matt and Allan, just, growing up listening to the college team, the college basketball team, that was a lot more impactful on me than just watching them on television. I'm just wondering, which kind of style do you prefer in terms of, your broadcasting career? If you have the opportunity, do you see television as kind of in the future, or do you think radio is what you prefer?
No, I'm a radio guy. I love radio, and I've done some television, but no, I love radio. I love painting that picture. I love the freedom of radio. Having the ability to tell a story and kind of create the emotion for the listeners. I think there's something magical about radio listening. I really do. And I'm not disparaging television in that sense, but I love doing radio play-by-play, and whether it's the NBA or my past with high school, I still go out and do some high school games for the affiliates that are on the Cavs network, because I love doing it. I was in a high school gym over the weekend, over the All-Star break. I went out and did a high school game. So, but it's just painting that picture. There's something special about that. And I'm not saying I'm special at doing it, but there's something special about the opportunity to do it. And I'm blessed to be able to do it now at the highest level.
That's cool. That's really cool, Tim. One of the things I've always wondered, because when at the University of Houston, I knew a guy who was called the Cougars basketball games, and he also had that voice, right? So what comes first? Is it the voice, or is it starting to do the broadcast and training the voice? Because everybody on the radio always has such great voices, like they're bringing it up the, like just that deep voice. And so what's first, the chicken or the egg, the voice or the gig?
No, I don't. And it's funny. I did a public speaking thing the other night, and I was asked the same question. I don't think it's the voice. I mean, yes, do I have a deep voice? Yes, I've had it since I was a teenager, but I always wanted to be a broadcaster. Like I told you, listening to those high school games in New Hampshire, I didn't have a deep voice at 9 years old. I know that. So, not every play-by-play guy has a deep, booming voice. To me, it's all about the ability to call the game. Now, do you have to project a little bit? Sure, you've got to use your voice, but it doesn't have to be, a deep voice. If you're calling the game and you're accurate and you're passionate and you can paint that picture as I was talking about, you'll be fine. It's not a matter of, well, I'm not going to make it because, I don't have a deep voice. If you're good at what you do, the voice won't matter. There are guys in the NBA that have higher voices than me, and they've been doing it for a long, long time. It's because of how good they are. So, my voice is what it is. I can't change it. It changed itself when I was a teenager. But no, maybe I'm blessed to have this voice, but I don't think I am where I am because I have a deep voice. I think I am where I am because I can do play-by-play.
Tim, final question for you. I want to switch gears real quick and talk about the Cavs fan base. I think throughout the last, I would say 25 years, I think those fans have been through quite a lot of transition. I'm just curious, post LeBron and now with this resurgence recently, what is the fan base like in Cleveland? You just kind of describe what their expectations are this post LeBron. Have they fully embraced this new era with Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell? Just kind of your thoughts on that.
Yeah, boy, great question. The fan base in Cleveland is rabid. I mean, this is a market that is a great sports market. The Guardians, the Browns haven't been doing so well the past few years, but they love their sports and they're knowledgeable about sports. So the fans that show up at Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse, they are loud, they are raucous, but they also know the game, and that makes it really cool because they understand, what's a good shot, what's a bad shot. They know when the other team has made a good play. So the thing that I love about this edition of the Cavaliers, and believe me, this is only my 6th year of play-by-play for the Cavs, but I've been in the Cleveland area for much, much, much longer than that, for about 40 years. But the thing I love about this version of the Cavaliers is that they've built it organically. And nothing against LeBron. I mean, guy's probably the greatest, if not one of the top 3 greatest to ever play the game. Brought a championship to Cleveland, just an incredible story. And I called a couple of his high school games, but what he has done is simply incredible. But this isn't LeBron with just a bunch of other guys. This was a team that was built meticulously by Kobe Altman, general manager Mike Gansey. The drafting of Garland, the drafting of Okoro, the drafting of Mobley. He gets himself involved, meaning Kobe Altman gets himself involved in that James Harden mega deal to get Jarrett Allen to Cleveland, a shrewd move. Then takes the big swing with Donovan Mitchell, player development guys like Craig Porter and Dean Wade. So they have brought piece and piece and piece and piece in to build this roster. And as I mentioned earlier, these guys are all young. They're just entering their prime. They're locked up with contracts. So this runway for the opportunity for a championship isn't just this year and then everybody's leaving and all that. This is going to be a solid elite team for the next few years. And I love the way they've built it. And I think Cavalier fans, while they took some bumps in the road a few years ago as all these young players were learning how to win, now they're seeing the fruits of the labor of Kobe and Mike Gansey and the whole organization. But I'll tell you what, their quest, their goal, flat out, is to win another NBA title. That is without a doubt. They want to win another title, and they are relentless, and they will not leave any stone uncovered until they get one.
Tim, thank you very much for joining us. Really appreciate it. Can our audience know where they can find you on social media, any other products you're up to, or anything else you want our audience to be aware of as well?
Really just on X, of course, formerly Twitter, but on X at Cavs Alcorn, that's really about me. And I'm on Instagram and all that good stuff too. But yeah, Cavs Audioverse is our X handle for the actual broadcast side of things, and there's different features that go up on there as well.
Fantastic. Thanks, Tim. Really appreciate it.
You guys were great, man. Good questions. I enjoyed this chat. A lot of fun. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.